The M72 LAW is the M2 Browning of rocket launchers. Even though in just a few years, it will have been 7 decades since its development, it refuses to disappear. In fact, there isn't a direct replacement, not even close. Its disappearance is expected in the coming decades, and its service is planned to last even until 2050. But why is a disposable weapon, which certainly has reduced firepower compared to more modern weapons of its kind, still in service? Why did it fail miserably in Vietnam? And despite this, why does the United States still manufacture them by the millions? In this video, we will analyze the current situation of the M72 LAW and the reason for its extreme longevity. So make yourself comfortable and welcome to Guns Club. Before the M72 LAW, the US Army was in trouble. By 1960, to defeat a tank, they used the M-20 Super. Bazooka, a huge rocket launcher that required 2 men to operate, entered service in the Korean War and was very effective. However, it weighed 6.5 kilograms, not counting the ammunition, and measured 1.52 meters, almost the same as a small soldier. It could be split in two for transport, but in any case, it was a weapon that seemed to be more suited to the warfare of the late 1940s. In 1959 at Redstone Arsenal, Alabama, a work team led by Hess Eastern and representatives from the artillery branch of the US Army got to work. The goal was simple: to create a one-man anti-tank weapon, as light as possible, and that could effectively defeat its target. A tank, a Panzerfaust, but adapted to modern tanks. This is where both sides would emerge. ¿Qué definirían el proyecto? Solid rocket motor, extremely small for its time, and a telescopic tube that shortened the weapon during transport. That's how the XM72 prototype came about in 1961. But it would take a whole year of testing for them to notice the immense improvement compared to the weapons available at that time. And it was standardized in 1962 under the name M72 Lancer. Very special and advanced for its time, the body was a tube made of fiberglass and aluminum that housed a 66mm heat rocket. It weighed only 2.5 kilograms, almost 3 times less than the Super Bazooka. It required only one operator and could be deployed in a few seconds. A real marvel, because of its features. For those who have never used it, it can be difficult to know how to deploy it, but it's actually quite simple. First, you remove the safety ring that locks the rear cover, then you take off the cover, which has a mechanism to lock it tightly. It must be removed completely. Finally, you extend it until it clicks, and you shout to the people behind you so that your teammates behind you move out of the way. The backblast from an M72 can reach up to 15 meters, so it's best if no one is standing behind it. Finally, once you've acquired a target, you pull the arming lever forward and press this button to fire. The whole process can be done in 10 seconds. The LAW's performance in combat in Vietnam could be described as bittersweet. On one hand, it was invaluable, being extremely useful for destroying Viet Cong fortifications and light defenses. However, like every American weapon in this conflict, it had reliability issues, as well as 2 problems that were truly serious and led to its complete failure. The first, interestingly, had to do with problems doing what it was designed for: defeating armored vehicles. These were tested with half-tracks and armored personnel carriers. However, it rarely defeated any armored vehicles in Vietnam. The most notable battle where it was used was the Battle of Lang Bay in 1968, when 12 PT-76 tanks from the North Vietnamese Army attacked a US Special Forces camp. The defenders had a dozen LAWs and organized improvised anti-tank squads. Many rockets simply failed or hit without detonating, although at least one tank was destroyed. That was pretty pathetic, but the icing on the cake was the numerous cases of warheads detonating in the air and injuring their users. When the conflict was over, they were permanently withdrawn from service because of this problem, and the search for a replacement began. In the mid-70s, the LAW program was created, and when it was given to the contractor General Dynamics, the same ones who make this baby, it was named the Viper program. But the Army went a little crazy with this new weapon. They wanted a similar level of improvement to what they saw from the Super Bazooka to the M72 LAW. And they came up with some pretty crazy requirements, like it had to be as cheap as a grenade so that soldiers could carry these new weapons instead of grenades. After this, a whole investigation was launched against General Dynamics, since they had promised that producing a Viper would cost $79 once mass production started, which really wasn't sustainable. And finally, after a lot of back and forth and apparently a strange boycott by politicians which led to a 68% budget cut, the Viper couldn't be the weapon the army wanted. In the end, in 1983, there was a competition between the innovative Swedish AT-4 and an improved version of the M72 LAW that we saw in Vietnam, the E-4. At that time, the army wanted an anti-tank weapon right away, and the AT-4 beat the LAW E-4 because it had a better hit ratio. So, by the late 80s, the AT-4 was the new anti-tank weapon of the US Army. Although actually, the M72 LAW remained in unlimited service since the Air Force kept buying them, and the Army also had a huge stock of them. So, in the Gulf War and the subsequent operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, interestingly, both weapons were used. And in the end, the final versions of the M72 turned out to be better than the AT-4, making it so that nowadays almost the M72 LAW managed to dethrone the AT-4 despite what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan that allowed the M72 LAW to gain such an advantage over the AT-4. In those conflicts, the infantry didn't have to face modern armored vehicles, so a good shot from the M72 LAW was enough to neutralize an old tank. These were common among the opposing armies. In fact, the most common thing was to face Toyota Technicals or poorly armored vehicles. The AT-4 had an anti-tank capability, but the M72 was enough. The M72 weighed around 3 kilograms, and in its compact form, it measured 63 centimeters. The AT-4 weighed 7 kilograms and measured 104 centimeters, and it wasn't nearly as versatile as the M72. Carrying an AT-4 in a Humvee was a headache, and in a helicopter it was even worse. The cost of an M72 was about $2,000, while an AT-4 was around $6,000, so it wasn't recommended to waste warheads on targets that could be destroyed in other ways. Although the AT-4 was better, the cost made the M72 LAW more than just an anti-tank weapon. In these conflicts, it filled the role that the M79 used to have in the past, a long-range grenade launcher, except in this case, it fired rockets. In Iraq, it was incredibly successful, being extremely effective in urban combat. In the mountains of Afghanistan, soldiers preferred the M72 LAW since they could actually carry two and still be lighter than carrying a single AT-4. Between 2005 and 2010, the United States Marine Corps acquired around 25,000 M72 LAW A7S. And in 2010, the US Army began to use the M72 LAW A7 system again as a standard issue. The Marines have regularly ordered M72 since then, along with the Army. And today, there are much better versions specifically designed to defeat infrastructure, such as armored vehicles like the M72A8 or the M72A10. For the production of these new models, a major contract commitment of $500 million was made, and they are expected to be fully deployed by 2027. Since they have a lifespan of almost 20 years, we could see these rockets in use even until 2050, unless an improved version is created in the meantime. So the M72 LAW will be an invaluable tool for much longer than we thought. Why were the MP40s used in Vietnam? In this video, you'll see why. Thank you for watching this video and goodbye.